Hi, it's Stephen Molnar here, and I'm joined by Konrad Bobilak, who's the CEO and founder of Investors Prime. Konrad, I want to ask you about an experience that I had a little while ago. And I rented a car and did a family trip through Eastern Europe, and I was actually driving a manual.
You were fully armed, of course.
But what was strange was that it was a left-hand drive. Now, I'm used to left-hand drive when I've driven the US, but it was a manual. And I was so frustrated because even though the pedals were the same, the hands and the mirrors, etc., were the wrong way around. And I realized that I had to actually unlearn a whole lot of things. So I want to ask you about the learning curve when it comes to property. Can you tell me what that means and how it applies to some of the people you've helped?
Definitely. Look, and there is a distinctive learning curve when you go through property investing. You know, if you look at the average person, we've been conditioned, I don't know why and by whom, to finish uni, get our first house, do a principal and interest loan for 30 years, then pay off the house, and once you've paid off the house, invest in property. And that's
and to get a good job and work hard.
You got to get a good job. And you know, and that's the dumbest thing you can do, in my opinion. I mean, dumb is probably a bad word. It's the least efficient use of your time as an investor, because then you end up with one asset paid off at 65 with no ability to buy any more assets because you're pretty much at the end of your career. I mean, just restructuring your house through doing an interest-only loan with 100% offset and then getting a couple of investment properties, you know, earlier on in the piece, you could pay off your home in 10 or 15 years and then end up with you know, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 properties by the time you're 65. And look, it depends on the person, obviously, and the risk profile and how aggressive they want to get. But that's very realistic for a lot of people to buy multiple properties. I've seen that happen all the time. The key thing is with the learning curve is that when you're starting off something for the first time, you're going to go through, there's 4 distinctive stages in the learning curve. The first stage is unconscious incompetence. You know, you don't know what you're doing. You know, you're unconsciously incompetent. You don't even know if you're making mistakes. You're going to find out later on. You know, eventually, as you persist in a particular area, let's call it investing in real estate, you become consciously incompetent, where you become aware of how bad you are. Okay, and this is probably the most important part of your learning curve, because then you have to make a decision whether you're going to persevere or you're going to pull the pin. And most people ultimately pull the pin unconsciously incompetent or consciously incompetent. They buy property in the Gold Coast on a holiday, they sit on the property, they've got vacancy rates going through the roof, they've got no capital growth. 5 years later, sell the property at a loss. Body corporate through the roof, you know. It's just a typical scam, you know. Eventually, if you do persevere with investing, you become consciously competent. And eventually, after a while, you become unconsciously competent, where you don't even know what you're doing. You just, you know, you can't even articulate what you're doing, but you're just accumulating properties and you're doing everything right. And that usually comes down to 4 things. You know, at that final stage of the learning curve, when you're unconsciously competent, you have a very strong psychology and level of awareness that you've cultivated over the years. You probably have a really good plan that's been developed over time by you and others. You've also probably, very likely, have accumulated a winning team of experts around you. Your mortgage broker, your accountant, your solicitor, and also you've now become an expert in property selection methodology, whatever your strategy is. Whether it's developing sites, optioning sites, you know, buy and hold, buy and sell, and that happens towards the end, and that's why there's very few people that transition through a learning curve and actually succeed in real estate investing. You know, if you look at the latest stats from the ATO, 72.8% of all investors in Australia only have one property. And I don't really call that an investor. You know, it's just someone that just bought something around the corner. Most of them...
Well, it could have even been their first starter home that they keep for emotional reasons after they upgrade to the new family home.
That's a very common thing. They get attached to their first home and they keep it for sentimental reasons. And in some cases, it's a good investment property. But in most cases, it might not be the best use of their money. Less than 0.9% of investors out there own more than 5 investment properties. You know, and so they're the ones that I think most people should be trying to get in contact with and work out what the hell they're doing. It's different from the majority, which end up just with one property. So the thing about the learning curve, it's there. You have to get through it. It's painful, but it's the reality of life. You know, it's like the first day on the job. You know, you go in. I remember the first day on the job when I was working for Australian Funds Management. I couldn't even send an email. I remember opening Outlook for the first time and go, what the hell are you doing here? Like I couldn't send an email, you know. You don't know anything, you know, and eventually you're on autopilot. It's the same thing with investing.
So tell me, Konrad, how can people who ultimately just want the result, how do they get through this learning curve the fastest, easiest way without losing too much money? What are some of the tips that you've come across?
And you know, it's a very good point. You can lose a lot of money in real estate. Real estate can be very unforgiving. You know, if you make a mistake in real estate, not only will you lose your investment properties, you can lose your house.
Yeah.
You know, most banks want to cross-collateralize you. Most people don't have trusts to buy property. They actually have, they cross-collateralize their home they live in with investments, and then the bank takes everything and sells you up. So if you make a mistake, it's very costly. We're not talking about $10,000 here. In most instances, a big mistake in real estate could mean bankruptcy, losing everything, you know. To answer your question, probably the best thing to do is to find a mentor, an investor or someone that's done that before and is willing to teach you, you know. And that's the hardest thing I think that most investors have on their journey to success, is find people that are legitimate, that are willing to teach you of how to do this correctly, and they've done it themselves. They've got to have the results behind them. If you can find that person, then definitely that's, you know, your journey is going to be a lot easier. I mean, it's like if you look at any successful person in any industry, whether it's in sport especially, you know, most of them have multiple coaches and mentors that focus on a particular part of their physique or their psychology or whatever it is. Yeah. And I think getting mentors and coaches is one of the keys to success. You know, and if you can find a good one, you're going to get to your goals a lot sooner than otherwise.
Okay, that's great. All right, well, thanks for that, Konrad.
Thank you.